My name is Stephen King. I've written several motion pictures, but I want to tell you about a movie called Maximum Overdrive, which is the first one I've directed.
Wow. What in the dickens is going on around here?
A lot of people have directed Stephen King novels and stories, and I finally decided if you want something done right, you ought to do it yourself.
Who was driving it?
I don't know.
Curtis! It's coming after us!
It was my first picture as a director, and you know something? I sort of enjoyed it.
What is going on?
I don't know!
I just wanted someone to do Stephen King right.
You want a war? You got one.
I just want to get the hell out of here.
So come and spend some time with me and my friends at the Dixie Boy. Spend some time in the dark.
Please don't let us be in the dark.
Help me.
I'm gonna scare the hell out of you. And that's a promise.
You're going to get us in an awful lot of trouble, man.
We already in trouble.
Maximum terror.
Jesus coming and he is.
Maximum King.
Maybe tomorrow will be our world again.
Dino De Laurentiis presents Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive.
In May of 1985, filming began in Wilmington, North Carolina, on Stephen King's directorial debut. He was adapting his own short story, Trucks, from his best-selling collection Night Shift. The year before, 1984, King had released Eyes of the Dragon, The Talisman with Peter Straub, and managed to release another book, Thinner, under his other name, Richard Bachman. And in 1986, Stephen King would drop one of his more iconic books, It. In between those 2 years, King would direct his first movie, Maximum Overdrive, a very busy time and an extremely productive time for one of our most prolific authors. The creative juices were flowing. Or did he have some help? King would say yes. He's never been shy about his substance abuse issues, and has mentioned that he was coked out of his head during the filming of this movie. Yeardley Smith, aka Lisa Simpson, mentioned in an interview that King would start drinking as soon as they were on set. If it was a day shoot, he was drinking at 6 a.m. If it was a night shoot, 5 p.m. Adding to all the drama was the fact that producer Dino De Laurentiis had brought over his Italian crew for production, and now you have an intoxicated, coked out Stephen King having to use a translator to interpret his vision onto film. One of those Italians, Armando Nanuzzi, the director of photography and famed cinematographer, who had previously worked on Silver Bullet, lost an eye during production when a remote control lawnmower malfunctioned and drove over a block of wood, throwing splinters everywhere. Nanuzzi sued Stephen King for $18 million, and the case was eventually settled out of court. So as you can see, the production was unusual and a little all over the place. It's a wonder that a movie managed to eke out a production at all. Emilio Estevez said in an interview about how bad King feels over this production, "The few times I've connected with him over the years, he's like, 'Can you forgive me for that?'" King famously has been sober now for decades. Hopefully he didn't have to use Quitter's Ink. But I still get the sense he's done directing movies. The one thing I've always wondered, would this movie be, and I'll say classic, I know I'm taking a little liberty with the word, but even a cult classic is still a classic. But would this movie be as fun without that soundtrack? I don't know how music copyright works, so enjoy these images instead of music. But if you want to talk classic, Who Made Who is a classic. So of course we have Emilio Estevez as our hero, of Young Guns, Mighty Ducks, and Stakeout fame. Obviously, he's been in much more, but I had to call out the Young Guns movies since those were my jam back in the day. Laura Harrington plays our hero S. I didn't follow her nearly as much, so I was surprised to see she'd been in a few other things I'd seen. Who's Eating Gilbert Grape and The Devil's Advocate. She also showed up in 2 episodes of Quantum Leap. The cast is full of amazing character actors of the time, many of whom are still working today. I'd already mentioned Yeardley Smith and Lisa Simpson, but I can't mention her without mentioning one of my favorite movies, The Legend of Billie Jean. Fair is fair. Also, I loved her in the short-lived TV show Herman's Head. Pat Hingle was our Commissioner Gordon in the early Batman movies. And we've seen Frankie Faison in Coming to America, Do the Right Thing, Till, and White Chicks. It's a big cast, so I won't be getting into all their details, but know a lot of talent was assembled here, giving the movie the gravitas it needed to deal with such crazy scenes. Ultimately, this is a bizarre movie with some bizarre behind-the-scenes shenanigans. The fact that it's not only watchable but enjoyable says a lot to the craft and skill Stephen King was surrounded with. To this day, it sounds like nobody had fun on set, and the horror story still managed to leak out from time to time. But all those tribulations turned into something timeless, a story about man versus technology, a story that could be updated today quite appropriately. And that's probably why the legacy of this movie lives on. The questions it raised, though at the time seemed ludicrous or excessive, have somehow remained irrelevant. The short story, in and of itself, is a short little thing with barely a plot involved. It starts with some people trapped in a truck stop, and quickly the group is narrowed down to 3, and those 3, by the end of the story, have become slaves to the trucks, filling gas for as many trucks as they can, for as long as they can. Like the group of survivors in The Mist, it's a dystopian ending where the future of our characters is in question. Turning that little story into a movie would require some elaboration, and who better than King himself to flesh out the story? In the movie, we start with the Earth passing through the tail of a comet. Halley's Comet was swinging by in 1986, so comets were very much on our mind as a collective population. Once in the tail, inanimate objects become autonomous. They spring to life. In one of the best opening sequences of any movie, if you ask me, the bridge raising on its own, the amount of carnage that ensues, and the creative use of watermelons. Also, I wonder if James Woods is off in the distance waiting for the bridge, trying to sneak a smoke while hunkered down in the front of his car. We get some campy goodness, as that soda machine takes out the Little League coach with a can of pop directed at his cranium, and we're subtly told, don't take any of this too seriously. We're just gonna have a good time, alright? Maybe that's why this movie is so good. It's a Stephen King fever dream, unfiltered and not cut with anything. King at his kingiest, hyper-accentuated, and so too are his stereotypes and political themes, heavy-handed and unapologetic. King, in On Writing, once mentioned about his analogies and symbolism. If it's there, and if you notice it, I think you should bring it out as well as you can. When watching this movie, I feel he's taken his own advice to heart. We have an overbearing boss demanding work for free, while threatening to call parole officers on his employees.
Now you want me to work for 9 hours and only clock in for 8?
And we have the religious guy with wandering hands, just to name a couple.
So, how far are you going up the road there, Sugar Pie?
Depends on how long you can keep your hands to yourself.
King never shies away from a stereotypical bad guy, and you typically know who exactly you're not supposed to sympathize with when it comes to his stories. But King also points out the hypocrisy in human nature, like the working class, that has become such a slave to the system that when they witness the system disintegrating around them, somehow still feel cheated.
You can! We made you! We're just some loyalty, you puky thing! We made you!
As mentioned, King has to flesh this out from the short story it's crafted from, and in a lot of ways this movie has many similarities to Dawn of the Dead, a group of people stuck in a truck stop, the malls of the interstate, and the cars showing up, trapping them inside. Much like the consumerism of Dawn of the Dead, when the zombies subliminally follow their habits, trucks too have habits. Additionally, spoiler alert, at the end, our heroes get on a boat and head to an island. Even the satirical and political themes are very similar. There's no denying that Romero did this better, but I don't feel cheated by the King version. The short story came out in 1973 in Cavalier magazine, half a decade before Dawn of the Dead. So to be fair, I may be reading into these similarities too much. Just about any locked door mystery is quite similar. We're not playing with totally original ideas here. The overlapping themes and elements just bring Maximum Overdrive and Dawn of the Dead a little closer than most though. I felt it was worth mentioning. From Alexa in printers and refrigerators, to self-driving cars, to ads for things we talk about suddenly showing up on our phones, or the AI that tech companies are adopting into our computers, phones, and tablets. Maximum Overdrive might have more to say about our current state than you might think. It's chock full of satire and commentary. It's not so much about us destroying ourselves, but more about us not anticipating where and how random elements might cause things to fall apart. We're one solar flare away from living in the Dark Ages. Figuratively. I'm sure we'd figure things out, but it would be an interesting time. Considering how well we all handled the last pandemic, I'm not sure I want to witness all that. But that's the secondary issue here. Societal collapse and all the conversations that it brings. Maximum Overdrive has some interesting points. Does it explore them? Not really. We get some cool imagery though. It's a movie that has the best intentions, but can never quite grasp how to tackle everything it wants to say. A lot of these passion project type ideas from authors who get to direct a movie seem to turn out a little like this, unfocused only due to the broad view of topics they've decided to work with. Clive Barker and Nightbreed come to mind. I guess I'm drawn to these flawed movie-going experiences. I find them fascinating, so for me, Maximum Overdrive is a blast. There's no way to move on without mentioning the other adaptation of Trucks, appropriately titled Trucks. Trucks came out in 1997 and features Timothy Busfield. It's a new take on the original. Aliens camp above a military town in Nevada. Of course. The fingerprints of the X-Files are all over this movie. And once again, mischief ensues. The issue with the TV movie is that, unlike Maximum Overdrive, it never embraces its craziness head-on, and instead floats around all its eccentricities. It makes for some fun novelty viewing, but overall, there's a reason it's not remembered fondly or much at all. It's a good 1-2 punch if you're looking for a double feature, which, if you're interested in giving it a go, would be my recommendation. Alright, we're on to Graveyard Shift, from 1990, a movie a friend dragged me to back in the day. I remember being a little underwhelmed with it at the time, but it's grown on me since, and I really do enjoy the short story. See you next time.